not be alarmed, remain calm. Do not attempt to leave the dance floor.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. This event will be held in the English language. It'll have language sign interpretation, ASL, and it will have closed captioning as well. The Spanish interpretation feature will be enabled in a couple of seconds when you will see in the bottom of your screen a globe. Please click on that globe and it'll display the option of language interpretation. Once you click on that option, it'll display English and Spanish. Please click on the English language and don't forget to click Done at the end of your selection. If you're on a tablet or on a cell phone, what you will see in the bottom of your screen will be the word More and 3 dots. Please click on that option and it'll display just the same language interpretation where you will click on it and it'll display English and Spanish. Please click on the English language and again, don't forget to click Done at the end of your selection. If you do this, it'll allow you to listen to the English interpretation if a Spanish-speaking person wishes to participate. I will give now instructions in Spanish. Buenas noches y bienvenidos. Este evento va a ser transmitido en el idioma inglés, pero va a ser interpretado al idioma español. En unos segundos se va a habilitar la posibilidad de escucharlo, donde van a ver en la parte baja de su pantalla un globo. Por favor, den clic en ese globo y les va a salir la opción de interpretación de idiomas. Una vez que den clic en interpretación de idiomas o language interpretation, den clic en español, porque les va a salir español e inglés. Una vez que den clic en español, por favor no se olviden de dar clic en listo o done al final de su selección. Si están en una tableta o en un celular, lo que van a ver en la parte baja de su pantalla va a ser la palabra más con 3 puntos. Por favor, den clic en esa opción para que les salga interpretación de idiomas o language interpretation. Una vez que den clic en esa opción, les va a salir español e inglés. Y una vez que den clic en español, no se olviden de dar clic en listo al final de su selección. Muchas gracias y que disfruten este evento. Thank you and enjoy the event. Back to the Me Too team.
Thank you, Milena. Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to see everyone. My name is Jasmine Wilson, and I'm the digital organizer here at Me Too. And we're going to start by just a welcome, and then we're going to go over the event rundown. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. K, who will talk about our community norms. But by way of welcome to trans survivorship in the age of Me Too. We're really excited about this really important, impactful a conversation. The first thing I want to invite folks to do, if it feels safe, is to chime in via the chat where you're chiming in from, your name, your pronouns, city, state, again, if it's safe, and where you draw inner strength from. Just really want to get some conversation going in this in the chat, because we do want this to be a interactive and engaging conversation. So that kind of sets the tone for the conversation. In terms of the conversation itself, once we go over our community norms, I will introduce all 4 of our amazing panelists and set some context for the conversation, and then we'll jump right into the chat. Always feel free to chime in with questions and comments, and if there's time, we'll get to those questions later, but again, really inviting an engaging conversation. And if anyone has any questions, please do feel free to add those to the chat. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. K, who will go over our community norms at this time.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. K. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the Director of Digital Engagement here at Me Too International. And I just wanted to go over our community norms. Every event we come to our events with community norms to make sure that people feel safe and comfortable in this space. So our community norms are as follows. Take care of yourself. Do whatever it is that you need to do, whether that's get up to get some water, stretch your legs, do whatever makes you feel comfortable, but make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Make space, take space. So don't be afraid to speak up, and don't be afraid to create space for other folks. We will have some really amazing discussion today from our panelists, and we would be really honored to receive questions at the end from you all who are watching along. Lead with curiosity, assume the best. We are going to be hearing some personal stories and some anecdotes around trans survivorship, so please be mindful of that. Honor this container. We've all heard what happens here stays here, but if there is anything that you would like to share privately, please do not hesitate to use our healing support for resources, or you can also reach out to one of us privately as well if you need support. And also respect the chat. Please be mindful of what you say in the chat, and remember that we honor folks' pronouns and chosen names, so please address folks as follows. And now I will pass it back over to Jasmine so she can introduce our panelists.
Thank you, Dr. K. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So our first panelist is Jennifer Barnes-Balenciaga. And oh, I'm so excited because Jennifer is my blood cousin, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that and honor our queen, Lula Kimball. So Jennifer Barnes-Balenciaga, newly Mrs. Jennifer Lee McQueen, is the director of the Crystal LaBeija Organizing Fellowship, a national fellowship program which empowers recipients to address issues impacting the lives of transgender women, transgender men, gender nonconforming, and non-binary people in the house ball community. She holds numerous organizational and committee affiliations and is a member of the illustrious House of Balenciaga, a leading institution in the house and ballroom scene. Jennifer is a resident of Manhattan and has an Associate of Arts in Political Science from Borough of Manhattan Community College, and is now pursuing a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Sociology with a minor in law at Baruch College. Welcome, Jennifer, my love. Thank you so much for being here. Next slide, Dr. K, please. Candace Nguyen is a graduate of UMass Boston with an individualized major in Asian American Studies. She identifies as Vietnamese American, queer, and trans. Candace is most known for her performing in the drag scene in Boston. However, Candace has also been deeply involved with working in the LGBTQ community. She started off at MAP for Health, which is an organization that is dedicated to improving AAPI sexual health education on topics such as HIV and STDs. Candace has also worked with the Boston Alliance of GLTBQ Youth, Providence Youth Student Movement, Viet Aid, and the Boston Asian American Student Intercollegiate Coalition, Fenway Health, and Mass General Hospital. She has been featured in Billboard, Pink News, Them, and even cameoed in Beyonce's recent Renaissance film. There are celebrities on this panel, ladies and gentlemen. Next slide, please. Thank you, Dr. K. And thank you, Candace, for being here. Jeremiah Anthony Righteous-Rodgers is a Baton Rouge bred and crawfish etouffee fed Black genderqueer woman who is now based in the DMV. Her career has been largely grounded in nonprofit, social justice work, and her passion for Black, queer, and trans people. With her macabre wit and sense of humor, she explores the depths of humanity, joy, grief, and everything in between through music, poetry, cooking, art, fashion, culture, travel, and relationships. She also enjoys Sugar Rush, tattoos, melancholy R&B, and Bluebell ice cream. Thank you, Jeremiah Anthony, for being here. Next slide, Dr. K. Zay'Mari Tynes, also known as a lyric, began his advocacy work in Virginia, focusing on HIV prevention and gender-affirming care. He has supported over 43 transgender individuals in their state and beyond, serving as a trans support buddy, providing crucial emotional and practical support to those without family or friends during these pivotal moments. He also assists trans individuals with name changes, birth certificates, housing, and letters for surgery. Driven by a desire to reach those with limited access to information about the transgender community, Zay'Mari created a podcast on Facebook Live called Trans Understanding, which promotes understanding among transgender individuals and between the transgender community and the broader public. He also hosts a show titled Each One, Teach One, designed for transgender individuals to share knowledge and learn from one another, covering topics such as HIV prevention, gender-affirming care, mental health, financial literacy, self-love, self-care, and general life skills. Thank you so much, Zay'Mari, for being here. Okay, before we jump in, I do want to kind of offer some color and context for this conversation. So let's start with where Me Too enters the conversation. So Me Too International is a convener, thought leader, and organizer in the global movement to end sexual and gender-based violence, grounded in Black feminist principles and survivor-led healing and action. Those principles include intersectionality, social justice and liberation, collective action and solidarity, centering marginalized voices, and challenging heteronormativity and patriarchy. To that end, today's conversation will focus on a crucial aspect of our community, the intersection of trans identities and the survivor justice movement. This intersection is often overlooked, yet it is essential to understand and address the unique experiences and challenges faced by transgender survivors. Survivors face disproportionate rates of violence, including sexual violence. According to various studies, transgender people, especially transgender women of color, are at a significantly higher risk of experiencing sexual assault compared to their cisgender counterparts. This violence is rooted in transphobia, systemic discrimination, and societal stigma, which also impact the ability of trans survivors to seek and receive justice and support. We're honored to have this group of remarkable panelists who have generously agreed to share their experiences and wisdom with us. So with that, we can jump into the first question, which is for all of our panelists, and we can go in order, starting with Jennifer. So the question is, here at Me Too, we believe in healing in action and healing as an action. How has your personal journey of healing and action brought you to this point? What practices or activities have you found helpful in your healing process?
Thanks for the question. Hello again. So I guess the conversation must start with identifying what the issues were. So on the healing journey, I think I took a lot of time to see what, especially family, especially the male parts of family, were in a position of not understanding or being able to allow themselves to understand the differences that come with someone who identified at the time as a gay Black male, right? So starting with that understanding at first about how I saw myself at that time, early teens and early 20s, and then understanding that I allow myself the autonomy to be the woman that I always knew I felt. So the practice would have been for myself is isolation. Isolation for me allowed me to mute out all the noise and the influences of such a close-knit family, and then to step back and actually see what I desired for myself. So taking ownership of who I wanted to be and what I felt internally was a big part of the beginning of my healing process.
Thank you. Candace, same question.
Yeah, my name is Candace. I think just providing a visual of myself for folks who may need the additional support. Asian woman, blonde hair, white t-shirt. But for healing, and I like that Jennifer has set up the question as if like, what was the issue? And I think for me, growing up Vietnamese, my family came over here shortly after the Vietnam War, and I'm the first of my family to be born in the US. And so there's like this unset debt that is owed to our parents for bringing us over here for a better life. And I think that's that rings true to a lot of like immigrant and refugee families. While growing up, there weren't a lot of positive words to describe anyone who was LGBTQ in Vietnamese, let alone in English as well. So I really struggle with like kind of just like talking to my family about anything queerness, because the word that I learned growing up, directly derives from like pedophilia. And so like for family members, that's something they're obviously not gonna want to own. They're not gonna be proud of that. And so anytime I would get bullied in school for being slightly feminine, I was scared to get in trouble, if I were to go home and tell my mom, and like I get the response of like, oh well, what did you do to them for them to pick on you, type of thing. Um, so it wasn't until like halfway through high school I met with a therapist, and for me, she kind of helped me understand that like, you know, being queer, being feminine was okay. And so I was able to connect with a lot of different like youth organization that had these folks who had similar stories with me, who like helped me relearn a lot of like the meanings and words that like now I am proud to like identify with. And so like just finding community, finding people, and then just finding a space to like be heard, has been healing for me.
Thank you, Candace. Jeremiah Anthony, same question, please.
Yes, thank you. And forgive my congestion. Again, it's Jeremiah Anthony. I am wearing a marigold button down. I have cat-eye glasses, a beard, and a fro. And if my background is a picture I took at a Janelle Monáe concert. So yeah. I'm really on my Jennifer Coolidge today. Good Lord. Anyway, to just start with the practices piece, I believe the way I have something that I call a grief practice and a resentment practice. The grief practice for me is just allowing myself, and they work together, but allowing myself to be sad about the things that have changed, to be sad about the things that I've lost, to be sad about the things that just didn't work out, to be sad that I'm happy, right? That I'm happy today, but I wasn't happy yesterday. And there's a grief to knowing that I'm happy now, you know, and then the resentment practice, which some people kind of, you know, shudder at that thought. But what I like to do is say that I can resent that this happened to me. I can resent the person or people that allowed something to happen to me. And I can hold that resentment, feel that resentment, and still continue with my day, right? So it's grounding the resentment, not that anger isn't a part of it, not that frustration isn't a part of it, and not that they don't have their own time for that, right? But for me, what I've realized is that sometimes instead of, for me, avoiding things or not, or diminishing things, right? Oh, it wasn't that bad, or oh, this isn't really that important. Say, no, this was terrible. Okay, it was terrible. Rah, rah, rah. Okay, now I can move forward. And then when it comes back up, I find some space to hold it again and then keep on pushing. And so I think for me, a lot of my personal journey with healing has often been spending enough time with myself to get to know myself and like myself. You know, I think for me, you know, you know, Baton Rouge, you know, bread, you know, cornbread, crawfish, etouffee, fed, all that. You know, I think what's really important for me is that I grew up in Southern hospitality, you know, and that's one of the reasons I moved. And so a lot of that Southern hospitality was to be gracious beyond your desire, capacity, or comfort. And I think one thing that I've had to do was be like, no, I don't like this, or this is who I am. And so, you know, I'm a woman, you know, who, you know, is very fortunate to have a full beard. I'm a woman who is very fortunate to love my deep voice, which y'all can't really hear right now because again, it's giving Jennifer Coolidge. But the point that I'm making is that really being able to say, who am I? Not, and like, yes, woman feels right for me. Yes, trans feels right for me. Yes, can I use profanity on here? Okay. Ian, thank you. Yes, you know, these motherfuckers ain't stopping me type shit, right? And just trying to be comfortable with the fact that no matter who I am and no matter where I am, violence is possible, but I also have the love and healing and strength of community. And so I think that, again, my personal practices of grief, resentment, and spending time with myself, coupled with community, has really been helpful to get me to the place of healing that I'm currently in. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Jeremiah Anthony. In my excitement, I forgot to offer a visual description of myself. I am a Black femme with brown skin. My hair is in knotless box braids in a bun, and I'm wearing Black glasses and a white t-shirt. I wanted to go ahead and name that. Zay'Mari, could you answer that same question, please?
Most definitely. My name is Zay'Mari. Right now I am I want to say caramel dark skin. I would really love to say I'm this muscle strong guy, but no, I look like a stick. I have long dreads, black and brown at the bottom. And I am a very, very happy spirit. I like to call myself a demigod, but I'm a very happy spirit. I think growing up, it was mostly isolation for me. That really, really helped. And to be honest, my mom sheltered me a lot. So growing up, it really wasn't that bad. I think the most worst experience I had was maybe West Virginia, but that was also a learning experience. I think what really empowered me was my sisters, the community I made, the group of women that I wake up and go to sleep to every day. Because if one thing they have shown me is to always give myself grace. And with that, I'm happy to say that made me the person I am today.
Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for those really impactful answers. I really resonate with a lot of what you shared. So let's kind of dive a little deeper. So when we talk about the intersections of survivor justice and trans identities, I think there's a really unique conversation to be had. Dr. K, you can move to the next slide. So the next question, I do want all four panelists to answer if you have something to offer. In what ways do you think the trans community's experiences with sexual violence differ from those of other communities? And also, in addition, what are some of the biggest challenges that you think trans survivors of sexual violence face? Jennifer, we can start with you again.
So I oftentimes take a step back. Again, let me start by saying visual description, Black woman, curly hair, dark, all Black, per usual. And Tom Ford glasses, eyewear. The emphasis on sexual violence, it does differ from other communities, but I think the interesting thing is when you think about sexual violence, it comes as different approaches, but the intent is the same. The damage that it is meant to cause due to the lack of someone thinking of someone else, the selfishness in that moment never changes, right? So I also want to bring to light that those who have survived sexual violence episodes, whether singular or repeated, it's one of those pieces where I think a lot of times mentally we start to think that it's something that we're doing wrong, right? That it becomes an internalized focus on what can I do to change myself or to guard myself from being fully authentic. And I think due to an episode that I had in 2014, I'd love to quickly share that. I, at that time, identify as a gay Black male, feminine, of course. And I took a journey living in Atlanta, Georgia, as I was there for 11 years, and visited a gentleman's house. And we were literally having a conversation about religion. I grew up conservative Baptist. Um, and the interesting piece around that is we're literally talking, he was in school, a seminary school, if I'm not mistaken. And we had a conversation about the chicken and the egg, what came first. And from that, derived, I guess his attraction was turned due to my response. And it became aggressive. And then not only aggressive, I think it crossed the line of what someone may want as sexual interaction into no consent and that is an interesting standpoint. I've stepped back and looked at the situation and actually about what I may have stepped into and didn't realize I was stepping into, but also understanding that there was a part about consent. That actually was kind of my first interaction with being faced with what does consent mean? What does it mean for someone to offer you of certain interactions? So I say all that to say it cannot end with us blaming ourselves, but I do think there's a deeper conversation that must happen with those who perpetuate that type of action. There's been this conversation often around retribution, around reacclimation of those who may have committed these types of atrocities. And I oftentimes step back and wonder if that's something that a victim is ready to deal with. Does it come with a standpoint of I'm allowed to say that I'm not actually wanting that to happen? And what does that look like in the future, for individuals who commit those types of atrocities? So I think it spins upon the wheels of my mind to think deeper into what does that mean and how often are we next to, if you look at sex offender registrations in neighborhoods, it would alarm you because it's a lot of people around that you would never even think off face value would commit some of the harmful actions, that have come. But I want people to think more on the standpoint of those types of movements.
Thank you for naming that. Let's move on to Jeremiah. Anthony, do you have any thoughts around how the trans community's experiences differ?
Yeah. And I just to hop to something that Jennifer said, I appreciate the framing of a challenge is what does restoration look like? Because that is something that we have to think about. If we are about restorative justice, first of all, it ain't got to be, anybody who's that mantle. If that's not for you, that's not for you. But it's like we have to think about people are harming people, and we as members of community who some of us believe in transformative justice, restorative justice, that's also gonna be something that we have to contend with. It's like some people, I don't want to see some of these people see the light of day again if I'm in my heart of hearts, right? But the reality is that politic of restorative justice, along with the fact that I don't want to see some of these people reach the light of day, how do we contend with those? Anyway, I just wanted to just speak to that because that really resonated with me. I'm going to speak more specifically around Black trans community experience. Is that, for the people who remember JonBenet Ramsey, right? And all versus all the other Black, queer, trans, young, old, or whatever people who go missing, who are, of survivors or not of, violence and harm, right? It's like there's so many movements about people, especially, but specifically Black trans people, where we don't know where they are. We don't know, we don't know where they are. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that the reality is, one, when we're harmed, beyond us, who cares, right? Where's the empathetic, community that's outside of us, right? I would be remiss to say that, and obviously not all, but there are trans people who engage in sex work, right? Which is unfortunately a very high risk environment due to the clientele very often, right? And so again, when you have to put your literal body on the line to be able to survive, it does create a different context for you to live, right? And also there are some people who not only to survive as far as just, having money, but also to gain access to gender affirming care, right? Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And then sometimes, as we also know, that if sometimes getting the gender affirming care that you need can also mess up your bag, right? Because sometimes the clients like what they like, right? And so that even of itself is a violence outside of the potential to be assaulted, to be ended, and so I think that's how trans community experiences sort of sexual violence differ from other communities. It's not that, I mean, we are harmed at disproportionate rates, yes, but also the contexts that we live in sometimes necessitate us to be put in those situations to be able to have that. And then the last thing I'll say on the differences and then get into some challenges, which I think may be the same thing, is that, and I do say this in love, it is so important that we remember that people are people. I think too often, at the prospect of community, it is so easy to forget that just because, we trans sisters, just because we trans siblings, just because it does not mean that that person cannot harm you. We are all capable of harm. And yeah, it just breaks my heart that, and I won't push, there's nowhere that's safe. I mean, there is nowhere that's safe because none of us are safe anywhere. We can only be safer, right? And we can provide safety as best we can. But I think that just to remember that it's important to remember that no one is incapable of harm. And that as we're engaging trans community, as we're engaging other community, as we're engaging people who are not a part of any community that we are in, it is important to remember that harm is possible. And just as harm is possible, care is possible, love is possible, but harm is possible. And so I think that sometimes, one of the biggest challenges that I don't think people talk about enough is what does it look like? And I know so many of us talked about sort of isolation and retreat, right? One of the biggest challenges I feel like I don't hear enough about is the challenge of being so accustomed to having to isolate for protection and then getting into community and then like letting your guard down, right? Letting yourself be vulnerable so that you can actually uphold and maintain community. And then somewhere in that moment, someone may take advantage of that, and you still having to be a person that is committed to community and committed to care, and also having to make sure that you are in a community that supports accountability for other people in community, yeah, I don't want to harp because I feel like I'm gonna go down there, but thank you so much. Yeah, that was that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for that. And we're gonna get into a lot of what you just woke up, so we're gonna pace ourselves, but thank you for that. Candace, can you speak to any differences that you may have witnessed as an advocate yourself? I'm not sure if you identify as a survivor, but as an advocate yourself in the AAPI community, have you seen any differences or unique challenges for trans folks who consider themselves survivors?
Yeah, I think, excuse me, for me, when I began my transition, I found myself comparing a lot to a lot of the girls who have transitioned for many, many years before me. And there was like this low self-esteem of like, dang, I just wish I could be there already. And so when you often hear like, just trust the process, just hear it, you come across like the chasers or the people who have like these fetishes, and you take those compliments that they tell you and they tell 10 other girls in your circle as well, and you take that to heart because you, as a trans person, like, don't know where you will get that authentically, right? And so as I've seen in my community in Boston, there are often times where these girls will take in what these guys are telling us, and then when the girls heal and get to the point where they don't need these validations from these men anymore, um, these guys, they react in such a violent way. They show up to your gigs, they show up to your work, they show up in places and not defend you. And like, also as a drag person or a drag performer, we are often promoting our shows. So like, there is a clear location, time, where the exact location where we will be at, and that causes like a safety issue as well. And so I think what we try to do in Boston is like really try to like look out for the next girl who is like beginning their transition, because we see the same guys over and over again trying to pawn off like the new girls. Um, and then like, as far as being Asian, I think being an Asian trans woman in America is different from like being a trans woman who is living in Asia. Like, I went to Thailand recently, and their experiences around like the trans community and trans identity and sexual violence is so much different, I feel like, because it's almost, going into like the survival sex work that they have to do. And a lot of these people may not even identify as trans. But in Boston, like, sex is also very not talked about in Asian communities. And so most of the times when we bring up these issues, it just feels awkward, feels embarrassed almost. And, you know, I also sometimes feel like when you are getting harmed by someone, it's hard to find the help that you need because, one, you are trans. And so like, the cards are already like pitted against you. And so I think there still needs to be a lot more resources, but also a lot more open resources. Because like, as you said, like, we can't guarantee people's safeties in these spaces, but also like, how do we become safer?
Thank you so much for bringing up the safety piece. We're going to get into that a little bit. Because, and I love also, Jeremiah Anthony, that you named that a lot of times part of being trans is either by necessity or choice, having to put your body on the line for survival's sake. And I'm excited for our next question. But before we get into that, Zay'Mari, I wanted to give you a chance to speak to this as I think your bio says you're a trans support buddy. And I wonder if you can speak to maybe, I don't want to say trends, but patterns that you've noticed in your support of trans folks, and even with gender affirming care and name changes and all those sorts of things. Like, can you speak to the challenges that folks face and how it can be a increased sort of potential for violence? Can you speak to that as a trans support buddy? in your experience as an advocate?
Well, I do know from my show. Like I said, I always try to connect people who are from different states, around the U.S. and out too. And we always have these deep discussions. One of the biggest things that was said was from Miss Candace, was a fetish. You know, a lot of these girls are not sex workers. A lot of them are looking for love, and when they go out and they look for that love, and some of them are stealth, some of them may not be, but as soon as they let that person know, hey, I'm trans, that it becomes a fetish. It's not about them anymore. It's about, oh, you're this person. Oh, okay, well, can you do this for me? You know, it's not no more that woo or that love or that going out on dates. It's more of, okay, you know, um, and a lot of that can also turn into, like she said, violence. And if something was to happen, the first thing they're going to yell out is, well, I didn't know. And when that person told me that, that's what happened. You know, it's sad. And that's how a lot of people get away with the hurt or the murder of young women. But yeah, I'm gonna let you go in deep into it.
I appreciate you saying that. The backup to it is that is not an excuse to murder someone. That is where responsibility comes into play. Adulthood comes into play. Communication comes into play because a lot of people don't feel safe up front. And to say that you want to kill someone just off of literally, they call them crimes of passion, if I'm not mistaken. And that defense itself needs to be reevaluated because trans people are dying, have been dying because of things like that, and its ability to just go off the handle and let that be the onus of it. And people getting a couple of months in jail may not even get any time in jail, and then everybody's left with, well, they brought it upon themselves. So yes, I agree. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, thank you both for speaking to that. Dr. K, can we move to the next question? I'm excited about this one. And I want to start with Jeremiah Anthony. So when we talk about sexual violence, we are not just talking about the actions of a few bad apples. We're looking at the institutions that uphold rape culture and a culture of dominance and this culture of power over, which we've already sort of woken up a little bit. So can you speak to the ways that you think media, government, nonprofits, and even entertainment industry can show up and change and help to perpetuate the change that we need to create safer environments? Because like you said, we can never be safe. We can only be safer. So I'd like to know what you think about the ways that all of these cultures support each other and what ways we can work to break those systems down.
Absolutely. I'm going to answer that, and I'm going to frame it because I see something that I do want to also address. I think too often times when we think about violence against trans people, we think about, sure, interpersonal, this person didn't like that, and, bing, ba, boop, whatever, things happen, right? It is also systemic, it is also structural. But one of the things that I think is really important to also name is that trans women and trans feminine people are not the only bodies, people, groups, demographics, right, that suffer. Trans men suffer. There are trans masculine people suffer at the hand of violence. I don't remember who said it, but it I think it was Zay'Mari. Every trans woman is not a sex worker. And also there are trans men who are, there are trans masculine people who are. And I think that it's really important that that when we think about from an institutional and infrastructural level, right, that we also don't do this sort of coddling of patriarchy, which is a system. I'm getting to the, I'm laying some foundation real quick. That we don't do this thing with patriarchy, right, where we say the only people who can be hurt are women, because the idea of that actually is quite violent, because it's the idea that women are weaker and men are stronger, and if a man can't handle something, then something is wrong with his manhood. And if a woman can handle something without a man, there's something wrong with her womanhood, right? She hard, she this, she that, right? So I just also wanted to bring that to the back to the fore of the conversation, that at least for me, when I speak about trans people, even if I don't use all identities expressly, I am actively and always thinking about trans masculine people, trans feminine people, people who are gender variant, gender expansive, people who don't use they, them pronouns, or he, him, or she, her, people who don't use no pronouns, you know what I'm saying? Because we're all community. So, and I'll continue to think through that. So going back to, I mean, one of the ways that I think media, government, and I'm also a communications professional. I didn't put that in my bio, but hey, and I did multiculturalism in media at one point. And so one of the things I would say for me is, one, having stories about trans people just living, right? And this may be a little controversial, but also when they do find romance that is not interracial, right? There's nothing wrong with the dolls in their interracial relationships, nothing wrong with that. And by dolls, I mean everyone. But the idea that if a black, specifically when a black trans woman finds love, it is a cis black man who doesn't see that she's trans, whatever the hell that means, right? Or that he's a white man. Like, where are the queer love stories with trans people, right? And also, how can we show in those love stories and in that romance, right, opportunities for consent, right? I would love to see more stories about two people who love each other that, hey, it may be known that they're trans, right? Maybe T for T, God bless, right? Also leaning into the community of loving ourselves with each other, right? I think that, you know, nonprofits can do my God, on today. Nonprofits can do, a lot better, I think, too, because I think, again, going back to Zay'Mari's, really everyone's point, but the one that really gets me is that when we think about trans people, we often categorize trans people in ways that are representative of the community, but not completely, right? So if the only resources that you have for trans people are housing, which people need, but if the only resources that you have are housing, food, maybe HIV services and some things like that, right? But like you still got people, the staff misgendering people. You still there's no, how can I an internship where you don't exploit, the labor of the trans community. Again, my God, today I can go on that all day. There's so many ways to actually support and uplift trans people, because the reality is, what are reparations? I'm specifically talking about Black people right now, but also Black trans people and Black trans queer people, right? But also trans people in this country have been deemed and treated as a scourge. The amount of trans people who have died as a result of Reagan's, and that whole era, the HIV/AIDS crisis, right? There are millions of people, trans and otherwise, but trans people who didn't get to live out the 90s, right? And so the government needs to listen to us, to not play in our faces and rainbow wash everything. You got cop cars with rainbow decals and pride, right? It's like making sure that we can be represented in the ways that we are by ourselves. Give us the money to talk about ourselves. Give us the space to talk about ourselves. Leave us the hell alone. Leave us the hell alone, right? Because I love my community. And I don't really need nobody else but Black trans queer people. Thank God for the other Black people, and the allies, we like y'all enough. I love y'all, kiss. But I think what's really important, right, is that I should not have to like y'all, whoever y'all is. I should not have to like y'all to not get killed. I was trying to avoid using that word, but I should not have to play patty cake baker's man with y'all to make sure that my friends are good, that you're not going to pull up on me when I'm walking down the street to get food, right? The idea that we have to be, I'm going to say this, I'm going to shut up. I'm sorry, y'all. The fact that we have to smile in the faces of those that would kill us in order to survive is diabolical. And so the ways that all of these institutions can help is by letting us tell our own stories, support ourselves, and let us want to connect with them rather than it be a necessity for survival. I'm done, y'all. Sorry about that.
Yes, wake it up. Thank you so much, Jeremiah Anthony. You hit it. You hit it on the head. I want to speak to Zay'Mari, and I'm curious, especially as a podcast host, and someone who has used media to connect to your folks. What kind of opportunities do you see, especially as it relates to the entertainment industry, for folks to again center trans people? What kind of ideas do you have around that? And what ways did you use, or how did you use your podcasts and your shows to connect to your communities? What do you think how do you think we can use media more like you have to really reach our folks? What do you think about that?
Ah, um, honestly, I'm still in the works of it. Trying to build a web page for just trans individuals. So we can all get together and all come up with ideas and creations. One of the biggest things we have to do, and as a community, is one thing: stick together, especially the Black trans community. We have to do that. We have to work with one another. And like I said, it's hard because everybody's in different states. Everybody has different rules. Everybody has different stories. And until we can all come together and come as one and have some understanding with each other and move together, not like you said, survive. I just want to live. I don't want to survive. I want to live. Like I said, financial literacy, self-love, self-care. Those are one of the biggest things. It's cool, like you said, they offer housing, which is one of the biggest things. We have to get off the street. Then we have to get care for each other. But then after that, then what? What about trades? What about getting someone back into school? GEDs, things of that nature. Jobs. My podcast was specifically made for that. For all of us to come together. If I could get on a TV show, I would. I mean, I know so many people from Flame Monroe and everyone else, but at the same time, I know everybody got their differences. You also have to listen to that person before taking judgment, because some people will put themselves out there for the community and act a fool, but some will also help the community without anyone even knowing.
Thank you for that. I can't wait until your podcast blows up, because we do need more media spaces that are by and for trans folks, and not just these mainstream spaces that give y'all a spot, or try to DEI our way to justice, because I don't believe that's possible. So I'm super excited to see what you do with both shows, and I'm excited about the resources that are coming for you, because I do think that that's exactly what we need to hear from trans people about what they need, and not just these like designated spots. Because again, for cisgender folks, our perception is still so limited. And even when we think about trans identities, our minds go to one thing, and we need to see y'all in all of your glory across the spectrum, so that we can really understand that there are needs that we haven't even begun to meet because our purview is so limited of what trans identity even is. So thank you for that, Zay'Mari. Candace and Jennifer, do either of you, especially because I know, Candace, you are in Boston, and Jen, you're in New York right now, but you also have a deep, some deep experiences with Atlanta. What do y'all think, either one of you think about, especially in terms of civic engagement? What do you think we need to see more of from our government, and especially with it being an election year? And I'm thinking about the ways that y'all both advocate for reproductive justice and gender affirming care and all of these other intersections that affect trans identity. So either one of you can chime in about what you see in your specific communities and what we need more of.
Yeah, I just want to just shout out Jeremiah Anthony for just bringing up the fact that, like, when we think about trans people, we often think about trans women, and it's very important to continue to highlight um, the range and the vast of transness and all these identities. And I don't know if y'all watched the show Traders, but Peppermint had mentioned on like the reunion show that like people relationship to trans people are often through what they see on TV or what they see on like the mainstream media. We've had Maury, Tyler Perry, and like so drag and transness have always been like the butt of the joke, right? And so when it comes to having like conversations like these or like actual authentic relationship with trans people, people start to be, they get confused. So as a city, I think it goes beyond housing. I think housing is very important, but it becomes like a cycle, right? So like, I don't have housing, so then I don't have like access like the internet to look for a job. I don't have a job, so I don't have health insurance. I don't have health insurance. So so there's so many things that I think a city government needs to do better, especially for us in Boston. Our main focus has been like housing, but like even the simple of the like helping people change their names has been important for people, hiring more trans people or gender diverse people into local government and hearing actually from community members, right? I think oftentimes local government tries to get into the community without actual representations from those communities to help make change. And so I think there needs to be better, more work around that, more movement around that.
Thank you. You want to chime in, Jen?
Baby, I got a lot to say. Okay, let's start from the beginning. So this is ridiculous. Let me do order. So I am married to a man in trans experience. Me and my husband have been together 6 years, going on 7. We were wed last year, March 24th, civilly here in New York. And we had our ceremony in St. Lucia, December 2nd of last year. Our engagement was December 31st of 2020. I bring that up because I was approached, and I'm calling out names. I was approached by OWN Network, and I was approached by OWN Network, and I think my cousin, our cousin, well, your aunt, Shannon, is on here, and so she's very aware of this. OWN Network reached out to me as soon as we got engaged. It was a big deal for a lot of people because, again, as we're mentioning, there is not a lot of trans for trans love shown so vividly. And then the story is very unique. A lot of people want to reinterpret some things that they see, but they don't really understand how time and God's movement is super divine and what a blessing. But they reached out to us during the time we were actually going through some things with his mother. She was having a surgery. Ended up during that time, it started to inflate uh, with seriousness that, of course, wasn't publicized. So, background story is the show, which if you look it up, it's out there. It's called Family or Fiance, and so they were trying to pilot back then the actual show because it started, I think, in like 2019, maybe 2020. And so they wanted us to be on the show, and what they wanted us to do was to see how our relationships with our nuclear family were. And so for my husband, his family's totally accepting. They're willing to do pronouns, have been absolutely beautiful and wonderful to us on our journey together, and for him separately. Um, and for myself, there are a few family members too that are so fortunate for me to be in great correspondence, constant communication with. As it pertains to my father, I told the individuals, the casting director, and everyone that was talking to us, because I'm a very serious person, I'm a Capricorn, I don't play those types of games, so let's get it together. So I told them they needed to reach out to my father probably first. It was a purposeful move for them to wait until the day before they were actually trying to push this off to inform my father what was happening. That kind of blew up. Me and my father kind of parted ways at that time because me and my husband went and visited Cincinnati, Ohio, which is where I'm originally from, Hamilton specifically. And we went back home in 2019 for Thanksgiving, and my father met Asher. This is before any engagement. I had no idea what he was planning. But he actually ended up asking my father for my hand in marriage. I had no idea. So when we went home, my father met, he met my grandmother, he met my Uncle Vincent and my Aunt Teresa. And no one was the wiser that he was a man of trans experience, not because we were trying to hide anything, but because he does move extremely stealth. And the issue came up when the show called my father and was asking him questions about how do you feel about your trans daughter dating a trans man. And, you know, he called me flipping out. So I say all of that to say they perpetuate, they being media, perpetuate how they want us to be seen. They purposefully want to draw in certain ratings. They purposefully do not allow us to showcase our love in the beautiful splendor that it is. And I can speak, it's funny, I'm speaking in such splendor because I might die on the table tomorrow. I'm having gender confirmation surgery tomorrow. So I'm kind of letting it all hang out, baby. And the tea is, I was blessed and fortunate enough to have a mentor, Dr. Stefan Elite Wallace. Mark Jacobs now passed away. He passed last year due to lung cancer for a person who didn't smoke, go figure. And he was a scientist, an epidemiologist. So how unfair, right? He actually put our engagement pictures and our wedding day, our civil wedding day pictures in Swerve magazine. That was the first time I had ever seen a trans relationship, a trans marriage, the announcement, all of those things in a positive light. And it's interesting because I've also been on Pose. I did 2 segments with Pose. I was in the actual show, season 2, episode 5, What Would Candy Do? And I was in that episode as a runway model in a black and white thing that was also shown in UK's Makeup Wars or something like that, because the principal makeup artist was my makeup artist for the day. So I say that to say, there are instances where they see who you are, they know who you are, and you kind of are placed into almost a box. I played two parts on that. Again, the runway model on the show, and then separately, I am a committee member for House Lives Matter. So I was able to talk about what House Lives Matter does as a ballroom participant, a Femme Queen Runway Walking of the Year, couple of years, few places type of woman. So the interesting thing is, when you look at media and the government and what they actually want to do, that is why I'm going into law, because I want people to understand, well, actually, the reason why I'm going into law is because Georgia's DMV has an actual policy that they don't change your gender marker based on the discretion of the actual teller. So they have that written into their policy, and I'm coming back to change it. So I say all of that to say there is a lot of interworkings of how, and do forgive me, because there are a lot of allies who are cisgender, but cisgender individuals who do not want the autonomy of what someone chooses, what someone acts upon in feeling and understanding and knowing and studying of self-discovery to come into fruition in stance everywhere. As it pertains to media, there are different outlets. It seems like we have to do podcasts, and my hat's off to Zay'Mari. Hats off to you on doing that. I actually just did a podcast on a net on iHeartRadio with Do Forgive, because I'm trying to reach all avenues because it's so important for us to be seen everywhere. Finally, a show is what it's called, podcast. And the podcast was more specifically about my ballroom involvement, but also the standpoint of how we have conversations about the back history of how a GED obtaining trans woman becomes almost this synonymous movement with all things that are fighting for equity. And I think it is a lot of times a lot of roadblocks, but it is so beautiful to see so many people pushing past those parameters and making sure that everyone is able to be seen in the light that they are dedicated to owning. Because in this day and age, we have to, dealing with the society we have, own exactly who we are and never let that falter due to someone not liking, not wanting. That comes with success. As you'll see in people who are climbing ladders of success, there are people who don't want you to do that because it makes them feel insecure, and we cannot allow that to happen. So I think that media, government, nonprofits, and the entertainment industry must either move out the way or fund appropriately for equitable movement.
Period. Thank you, Jen. I absolutely agree. I can't believe that it's already, well, I'm Central Standard, so it's 5:44 here. I can't believe that time flew by like it did. So I think we're going to skip forward just a few questions and, we'll go back. Thank you, Dr. K. I'd like to offer this question to all of our panelists as a closing question. And if you could keep your comments a bit consolidated so we can stay on schedule. But first of all, thank you all so much for such a robust conversation. I think the takeaways are just honestly that the powers that be, like you said, need to move out the way. And I don't even want to say or move out the way and fund. But give us the services, give us the access and the equity that we deserve and that we've been demanding. And I'm really grateful for everyone's insight. So this last question I'd like to offer to everyone. What advice would you give to other trans survivors seeking care, support, and healing, not just limited to sexual violence, but in general as they continue to come home to themselves? Like I think that's Dr. Katie Geneva Cannon who came up with that. But what would you offer to other trans survivors who are seeking care, support, and healing? We can start with Candace.
Yeah, what advice I would give is just like um lean onto your community, lean onto the folks you call your sisters, your siblings, anything like that. That has been very helpful for me because I think oftentimes we are either too we've been through so much that we try to hold our feelings in, and so I think it's very important to like be vulnerable with those you feel safe around and opening up, but also like speaking up, using your support to speak up for yourself, to what you need, to what you can do. I think that's been very helpful for me personally.
Thank you. Zay'Mari, what advice would you offer to trans survivors seeking care, support, and healing?
Don't give up on your community. Um, that's one thing I have learned. In going from Virginia all the way to Houston, Texas, one of the biggest organizations I found that had love for Black trans man and trans woman was this place I got this award from, BTEC. Um, BTEC was the number one thing for me. That's where I got that Trailblazer Award from. Um, when I said self-love and self-care, and it was for a whole week, please, if you are out there and you need that, hit them up. It's every year around April. Don't give up on your community. That's all I can say.
Thank you so much. Jen, what would you offer to other trans survivors?
My. So I've been in therapy off and on since the age of 8 due to a sexual molestation at the age of 6. So therapy has helped me survive and really move forward. You know, therapy is not a one-stop shop. Just because someone will listen to your problems does not mean that that's the person for you. It is okay to know and feel inside your heart that this person is not able to help you on the journey that you're going to or the place that you may be in your life. So I always say actively reevaluate how you feel after every session, because it seems like mental health is something that surface level people are discussing, but the accessibility, and my husband has, you know, great health care, and the fact that I still have been without a therapist for almost 3 years now, you know, it happens to everybody. You know, it is a journey, but please give it a chance. Allow yourself to talk about yourself in the first person. Allow yourself to really be present with what you feel. And I promise you, everything will work exactly to the movement that you would like to see.
Thank you, Jen. Jeremiah Anthony, can you close us out with some advice for trans survivors seeking care?
I sure can. Also, Zay'Mari, shout out to BTEC. That's why I met a few people, also Zay'Mari. And I do look at your podcast on Facebook. I don't know if you knew that. But anyway, that accountability is love. I think that's the biggest thing, is that when you are seeking care, when you are seeking support, when you're seeking healing, whether it be interpersonal, intrapersonal, like just you, yourself, and you know, accountability is love. If a person, people, entity cannot be responsible for the harm that they've caused intentionally or hopefully unintentionally, but unintentionally or otherwise, if they can't be accountable, then find somewhere else. Because accountability is what keeps us safe. Accountability is what supports our consent. Accountability is what supports the fact that we all make mistakes and we have to own them. And so there's that. I think therapy helps us be accountable with ourselves. I think community helps us be accountable with ourselves, you know. And that last thing, that capitalism is very real. So accountability is love, but capitalism is a killer. And so if you find yourself having a hard time finding access to accountability, to community, to support, this is the time to, raise up your fist and say, capitalism ain't gonna save us. We save us. And we love us. So that's it.
Thank you all so much for such a beautiful, robust conversation. I also want to invite our panelists to drop any social media handles, any ways that folks can connect with you, follow you, any upcoming work or events. Feel free to share those in the chat. But again, thank you all so much for such a great conversation. And also, here are some other ways to connect with me too. You can start your healing journey through Survivor Sanctuary at sanctuary.me2mvmt.org. It's free to sign up. There's so many beautiful lessons that really meet you where you are, wherever that is in your healing journey. And we also are inviting survivors to share your story anonymously and safely through our storytelling platform, which is at stories.me2mvmt.org. And again, want to give our panelists a chance to drop all of their goodness in the chat. But if there aren't any other questions, I want to thank everyone so much for lending us 90 minutes of your evening. I hope that you walk away with some enlightenment and some new insight on such a crucial intersection in this movement space. And we look forward to hosting another really meaningful event soon. So make sure you stay connected with Me Too. Follow us on Instagram at Me2MVMT. And we will see you next time. Thank you all so much.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
This was great, truly.
Thank you. We'll be in touch. Thank y'all so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.